Hello once again, and welcome to another edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. I'm joined by 620 CKRM Regina Agri-News Director Ryan Young, as well as the Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hursh. I'm GX94 Yorkton Agriculture Director Doug Falconer, and a number of items that we wanted to talk about today, including seeding. We saw Manitoba is at 97% complete when it comes to spring seeding. Saskatchewan 99% complete. Of course, the crop insurance deadline passed last Saturday. Kevin, doesn't sound like much else will be going into the ground at this point.
No, maybe some green feed in some instances, but kind of buried in that whole crop report is surprisingly 3% didn't get seeded, and they estimate another 3% that was seeded has been flooded out and probably won't produce a crop. You take that 6% and multiply it by the number of acres in Saskatchewan, and you're in the range of 1.5 or 2 million acres. So that's pretty significant cut out of production in Saskatchewan. So that, I think, was really the headline rather than the 99% complete with seeding, is that there's significant unseeded acreage, particularly in east central Saskatchewan, also significant flooded acres that won't produce, again, most of that centered in east central Saskatchewan.
Also this week, Ryan, you had a chance to speak with David Derwin from Winnipeg, Ventum Financial, and you talked about canola and wheat prices and futures with him.
That's right. Yeah. Just remembering wheat the most in particular. He said that they've been kind of going a bit of a divergence is the word he used, a little bit downward compared to canola. Canola, he said, it was kind of holding its own. Although I've seen the cash price for canola at the Moose Jaw Bungie terminal really taken a hit this week. It's kind of around that 15.87 a bushel mark, and I believe to start the week, if my memory serves me well, it was kind of flirting with $16 a bushel again. But nonetheless, going back to the futures prices, again, wheat just kind of hitting that lower trend overall. Typically this time of the year, as you said before in our previous talks, this time of the year is kind of where the seasonal highs are. But, this week was kind of an exception to that. So seeing where the weather goes is kind of one of the things to look out for, as well as CUSMA. We'll probably get into that a little bit more ahead in the roundtable, but that's another thing to kind of look out for both wheat and canola, as well as the Iranian war, seeing where, the developments go. We know that there's a deal to kind of end it essentially, but whether Donald Trump decides to say something about it or not, that could wildly change. We'll see where that goes in the short term, but that was something he also said to keep in mind as well. He did note when the war started, wheat kind of went up along with canola, but wheat didn't really stick around on the higher end of trading. So that's just a kind of notable thing to kind of remember and kind of take as information as you will. So yeah, that's kind of basically what we kind of talked about with wheat. And for canola, again, just kind of trading around that 750 mark, 750 a ton rather. So it's been kind of holding its own overall. So that's been kind of the notable trends so far.
Kevin, your thoughts on canola and wheat futures?
Well, specifically on wheat, but it's really going to be a weather market, and people are going to watch and see how that U.S. winter wheat crop, is it as bad and as drought stressed and as poor as we thought now that they're into harvest into the winter wheat area in the U.S. Also interesting to watch what happens to crops in Europe. You've probably seen in the news a record-breaking heat wave in Europe, and that's got to have some sort of effect on crops. But then geopolitical situations, what the Middle East is, and then a lot of that's been factored into the equation unless there's a huge surprise there. And the Ukraine thing that we tend to forget about, but again, they keep shooting at each other's agricultural assets and shipping infrastructure, so that has an effect as well. But I think we're now into a weather market, and here in Western Canada, one of the weather market factors is sogginess, surplus moisture. And as we tape this on Friday, looking forward to forecasts of a lot more moisture to come in the days ahead, and that actually could put quite a kink in our production plans as well. So I think we're really into a weather market.
Another item that came up this week was, Kevin, you did a story about the difficulties when it comes to farm transitioning from one generation to the next, especially when it stays in the family.
And it's especially difficult if the land is tied up in farming corporations rather than held personally. But transition also involves a lot of feelings and emotions as the older generation wonders about retiring. The younger generation wonders about what the transition will entail and when it will happen. And then you add all of the legal ramifications and all of the tax ramifications. So I was really pleased to talk with Beau and Cashe Stevenson, who farm in that St. Brew area. They were actually runners-up in the Outstanding Young Farmers program, and I saw a presentation they gave during the farm show back in March, I guess that was. So interesting folks, a feedlot operation, a grain operation, and a cow-calf operation, and talking to them just sort of delineated all of the difficulties with transfers and worries about paying high capital gains tax, particularly when land is held in a corporation and therefore is not eligible for the $1.25 million lifetime capital gains exemption. But a lot of farm families going through this, trying to work out transition plans that meet everybody's expectations.
Also this week, Seedmaster held a special event out at their factory there near Emerald Park. Ryan, you had a chance to head out there.
Yeah, in fact, I was even invited by the CEO, Alan Wiens, so that was kind of a cool thing to get right before the previous weekend. But yeah, I managed to get over there and just kind of check things out. It's my first time at Seedmaster at their main manufacturing facility in Emerald Park, just east of Regina. It was a good little event overall. Just had a chance to talk to the founder of Seedmaster, Norbert Beaujeu, as well as Alan Wiens. And talking with Norbert, it was kind of an interesting story. You know, it's kind of one of those stories where, you know, he was farming, had a heck of a time trying to plant canola, plant canola especially, just wasn't getting the result that he wanted. So having the engineering background, he thought there must be a better way to do this. So kind of put pen to paper and managed to come up with a design by the early 90s, patented that, founded Seedhawk in the 90s, and kind of continued to fine-tune the equipment before he founded Seedmaster in 2002. So it's kind of grown since then, having locations, a network of dealers all over North America and even into Australia. It's kind of a cool little success story for Saskatchewan. And looking forward to the next 25 years, both him and Alan Wiens, they both believe that they're in a position to grow, continue to grow in the next quarter century here. So we'll kind of see where that goes, especially given the context of CUSMA as well. There's a little bit of concern there, but they can only control what they can control. So overall, a nice little event and a nice success story.
Kevin, 25 years for Seedmaster. Hard to believe. I guess it kind of grew out of Seedhawk as well. Yes, and Norbert Beaujeu was brothers with Pat Beaujeu, and Pat was in agriculture college the same time as I was, and I was a reporter with CTV in Saskatchewan when Seedhawk was first established as a fledgling company. And so the brothers split, and Norbert founded Seedmaster, and they've both gone their separate ways. Seedmaster is going strong. Seedhawk had investment from the Swedish company Väderstad. As I understand it now, Väderstad owns all of Seedhawk and still brands some of its products with the Seedhawk moniker. But a very successful Saskatchewan success story, one of many equipment manufacturing success stories in the province.
All right, and also we had the Farm Credit Canada report, Ryan, about CUSMA and what direction that could go once negotiations start on July 1st.
Yeah, they had a report earlier this month, kind of well in advance of the formal review, and that's coming in about 4 or 5 days' time as we tape this. But they were just kind of wondering, you know, what if CUSMA is not renewed? They kind of explored that a little bit, and they got into some numbers on how the U.S. tariffs have had an effect on Canada's GDP, as well as business confidence overall, before the tariffs and after the tariffs, and how that could also affect interest rates. You can find that out on Farm Credit Canada's website if you want to check out the numbers. But interestingly enough, they had three possible scenarios that they were looking at with this review. One possibility was the trade deal is renewed as status quo. It's extended for another 16 years. The tariffs are eliminated, so that it would boost GDP. They said that that was a low probability of that happening, just given how the U.S. has kind of approached this leading up to the review. Second outcome was the trade deal is scrapped, terminated entirely, and that would have negative consequences. Again, that's a low probability. So the one outcome that they believe is the most realistic is that the tariffs remain and that the review would be happening on an annual basis going forward. So when I was talking to Craig Johnston, who's a chief economist and vice president at FCC, he was just kind of reminding everybody that if things don't go well with this review and there isn't an extension to the trade deal still exists. We still got another decade of this trade deal as we know it. It's just that the review is going to be held on a yearly basis. So they'll go back to the table again next year and the year after that, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the outcome that they believe would happen if my memory serves me well. So I found that kind of interesting, and also, excuse me, not so much of a surprise, just given how unpredictable the U.S. in particular has been since the Trump administration took over. So kind of an interesting little report and story, and yeah, we'll see where CUSMA goes here. That is going to get underway next Wednesday.
Kevin, your thoughts on Farm Credit Canada's reasoning in this report?
I think they probably, no one can predict the future with great certainty, but I think they are on the right track. We won't get CUSMA as it now stands going forward, but hopefully we also won't see a complete breakdown of trade talks and trade exemptions. Some sort of middle ground will likely be forged. Just a question that ends up as to just how many tariffs and just how many restrictions might we have to live with a revamped deal. But I think the FCC analysis is sound. Their idea of something in the middle ground is probably the most likely scenario.
Also this week, Kevin, a court judge in the United States ruled that was basically putting a stop to a bunch of litigation when it came to Bayer and the glyphosate product, which commonly referred to as Roundup. Of course, a lot of people have been suing Bayer over the years, claiming that they got their cancer because of handling glyphosate. Your thoughts on this latest news event?
Yeah, this went to the U.S. Supreme Court in a 7-2 decision. They struck down this particular case of a farmer with cancer suing Monsanto, which is now owned by Bayer. And I guess I'm just pleased to see sanity finally prevail. If the federal regulator says the product is safe and doesn't need to be licensed or doesn't need to be a warning for cancer on it because all evidence is that it isn't cancer causing or no more cancer causing than a lot of other things, then why can you sue the company for actually following federal rules and federal laws? So this might stop and is expected to stop a lot of the litigation that was piling up and really piling onto Bayer. And they've paid out a lot of money, but this might cause the end of that. And my understanding is that Bayer shares increased pretty dramatically in value following this legal decision in the U.S.
All right, and also this week, Ryan, you had a chance to delve into the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada Drought Monitor for the month of May.
That's right, yeah. And just looking at the map for the month of May, Saskatchewan as well as Manitoba, they were looking pretty good. There wasn't a whole lot of areas that were colored in moderate conditions for drought or abnormally dry, so that's really good to see. It's only kind of the southernmost sections that had those conditions, but Alberta, it's a bit of a different story as they had quite a bit of areas that were covered in moderate drought conditions, abnormally dry. Um, Again, the southernmost part of Alberta had severe drought conditions. The Peace River had drought conditions, and an area in between Calgary and Edmonton, the same thing. Overall, when it comes to precipitation, it was below normal for most of the month, except for the last day when they had that big rainfall event that had 1 to 2 inches of rainfall in a short period of time over much of Alberta. It also extended into the western part of Saskatchewan. And when it comes to temperatures, it was hot, cool, and then hot again in summary. So Trevor Hadwin, who's the agroclimate specialist with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, he said despite the temperature swings, it didn't really change the conditions for Saskatchewan or Manitoba. So that's a good sign, a good thing to see in a way. I also compared that with just conditions over the last 30 days. So basically, most of this month as of Wednesday. And it does incorporate the rainfall events and the on again, off again rain that we've had pretty much all month. And not surprisingly, Alberta had over 200% of precipitation. That covers a large area of Edmonton and just overall above normal precipitation for Alberta. So that's good to see. It's also a similar case with Saskatchewan and Manitoba. There wasn't too many areas that had below normal precipitation. So good to see that moisture coming in, and hopefully that is retained. We don't really need too much rain at this point. We need the crops to develop, but that's kind of how it all shakes down in terms of conditions.
Kevin, what do you think of the May drought monitor?
Yeah, and that might be the case for May, but June really changed the picture as Ryan delineated. And I was also spent some time looking at percent of normal precip maps for various time frames over the growing season or even the agricultural year, which starts September 1st, and trying to track what's happening. But I think in Saskatchewan now, surplus moisture is a bigger problem than not enough moisture. And a large percentage of especially the eastern side of Saskatchewan is dealing with surplus moisture. And the areas that are actually considered short of moisture are pretty small as a total percent. And as we look forward to the forecast in the days to come, too much moisture may be the issue for more and more producers as we go forward. So an unusual situation where oftentimes there's large tracts of Saskatchewan crying for rain at this time of year. At this point, there'll be some people hoping that the tap shuts off for a little while, and others that will be glad to have a bit more rain, but are not in the dire need for rain that they sometimes are at this juncture.
It was also announced this week, Kevin, that Dr. Brian Rossnagle is being inducted into the Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame later this year. Well deserving?
Yeah, I've probably known Brian Rossnagle for 40 or 45 years, just an amazing individual, and also stepped outside of just being a wheat and barley or a barley and oat breeder, was involved in many aspects of the industry. I think he was even president of Canadian Western Agribition when the grain show was very prominent at Agribition. So a great individual, made a great contribution. Good to see the university's Crop Development Center nominate him. Good to see him going into the Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame.
All right, and finally, something to look forward to next week is the seeded acreage report, and you're going to be checking out those numbers, Kevin.
Everybody's going to be wondering about the canola acreage, and my opinion is that the non-traditional growing areas, such as where I farm in southwest Saskatchewan, I see more canola than I've ever seen. So I think the canola acreage will increase more than the expected 1%, and will be above the what Statistics Canada initially suggested back in March. But this report that's coming out on Tuesday, on June 30th, Unfortunately, that information was collected end of May, beginning of June, and there was still a lot of seeding left to do by that time frame. And there's a significant acreage that didn't get seeded, and there's other acres that got flooded and won't be harvested. So as soon as this report comes out on Tuesday, it's going to be panned right away for being out of date and not entirely accurate, and people will be double guessing what the numbers are. But I do expect the canola acreage to be strong in that report.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. On behalf of the Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hursh, and the 620 CKRM Regina Agri-News Director, Ryan Young, I'm GX94 Yorkton Agriculture Director Doug Falconer, saying so long until next time.